Welcome to the Here's Waldo podcast, where we sit down with top visionaries and creatives in the video game industry. Together, we'll unravel their journeys and learn more about the path they're forging ahead. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome to the Here's Waldo podcast. I'm Lizzie Mintos, founder and CEO of Here's Waldo Recruiting, a boutique video game recruitment firm. In every episode, we dive deep into conversations with creatives, founders, and executives about what it takes to make a successful video game. You can expect to hear valuable lessons from their journey and get a glimpse into the future of the video game industry. This episode is brought to you by Here's Waldo Recruiting, a boutique recruitment firm for the video game industry. We value quality over quantity, transparency, communication, and diversity. We partner with companies, creatives, and programmers to understand the why behind their needs and provide a white glove experience that ensures a win-win outcome. Today, we have Deniz Gezgin on the show. He is the CEO and founder of 5x5 Gaming. He has 15 years of experience in gaming and digital collectibles. He has been in product, growth, and executive roles in companies such as Zynga, Tops, Machine Zone or MZ, and FunPlus. Let's get started. Thanks for being here. First of all, will you tell us a little bit about your studio?
Hi, Lizzie. Thank you very much for the introduction. I started 5x5 Gaming about 3 years ago now, after realizing there's a huge opportunity between gaming, blockchain technology, specifically NFTs, and digital collectibles. We are a small studio. We have about 10 people now, and then we have about 6 people part-time. Our first game is Battle of Kingdoms. It's an auto chess game that allows users to collect heroes throughout the history from different nations, and then players also have the ability to turn them into NFTs. I started the company with the huge belief in digital collectibles and kind of where we will be in about 3 to 5 years in terms of NFTs and digital collectibles. So we focus on making mid-core and core games with NFT collectibles. It's a very international company. We are fully remote. We don't have that many employees in the United States. It's myself, a community manager, and a back-end engineer in the US. Rest of the people are distributed between Mexico, India, and Vietnam.
Wow, I love that. That's the best part about COVID, just being able to hire anywhere and having
Exactly. I mean, we started the company during COVID. So when I started the company, I think we were like 6.5 months into COVID. And, I bootstrapped the company myself. And it was initially like 3 people plus myself. And everyone was remote and outside of the United States. And as we kind of got in investment from angels and institutional VCs, we expanded the team within the same structure. So we didn't really, set up an office or anything like that. So everybody remains fully remote, and I'm hoping we can actually scale it that way.
Yeah, definitely. I'm remote too, and we did it in person. I don't know if you've done that, but it's so crazy to meet everyone in person when you've been working for years and years remote too. Look how tall everybody is, and just their mannerisms are a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, I think eventually, as we launch we're just about to launch our first game. We are currently live in 65 countries, and we're going to do our global launch in about 2 weeks. But I think as we build more titles, there is going to be a point, I'm sure, we will have a physical office. But I think for now, we'll keep it remote.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Tell me about starting the company. What made you say, it's ready, it's time for me to start my own company? How did you come up with the idea? Walk me through the early days.
Yeah, so, like you mentioned, I've been in gaming for about 15, 16 years. Worked in some large, unicorn companies like Zynga, Machine Zone, FunPlus. And towards the end, like 13th, 14th, and 15th year, I started working at digital collectible companies. One of the biggest one in the world is Tops. So I ran their digital business for about 2 years. And I'm a huge RTS a strategy, resource collecting, a gaming nerd, if you will. And I started to realize there's going to be, with the emergence of NFT and blockchain technology, I realized the digital collectibles will be much easier to maybe owned and also transferred and traded and sold and bought. So, before I started my company, 6-7 months, I started doing some research, my free time. And I said, look, there's a lot of experience that I have between gaming and digital collectibles. And I think this new gaming company that I can put together, which focuses making games with NFT collectibles, could be successful, if you will. And I also didn't want to build games like hyper casual games or casual games because I don't personally like to play them. So that's kind of how it's all started. I wanted to build something that I enjoy and then also kind of brings all my experience together. So that's how I started the company.
And how did you find your founding team?
So I worked with my founding team in multiple different places. So like I mentioned, I bootstrapped the company early. And the first engineer and the first creative person, I actually worked with them in other companies that I was working at, like Tops and then Epics Digital Collectibles and a couple other places. I worked with those people. And then I presented my idea to them and I said, hey, I have some money saved and I'd like to start building a prototype with you guys. They were really excited, and that's kind of how it's all started.
So you approached them with your idea, but you already had the idea kind of formed.
Yeah, exactly. I wrote I knew what type of game that I wanted to build. So I'm a huge sucker for like auto chess games and also, like I mentioned, strategy games like Civilization or Rise of Nations or Age of Empires. Yeah. So I knew the theme, I knew the art style, and I also knew the mechanics that I wanted to have in the game that leads into card collecting and deck building and progression. And I started writing a spec doc. And once I had like 35, 40 pages of a game spec doc, I approached the initial team and I said, hey, I have an idea. I'd like to build this and I saved this much money. Would you guys be interested? And yeah, they were positive, and that's how we kicked it off.
I love to hear the founding story. So you bootstrapped, but eventually you started fundraising. That is a hot topic right now. It's funny, I interviewed Ed and he's talking about how he has to have people take his money, but I feel like people who are raising money say the opposite thing. What was your fundraising experience and what did you learn? What do you wish you could tell yourself now? Or so if someone else is fundraising, what would you tell them?
Great question. So, we kind of went there in small chunks, if you will. So my story is not, we didn't raise like $10 million and, that's not really my story. So what I've done is I bootstrapped it with my personal funds for about a year. It took us almost a year to be able to present a good enough prototype and then find the investors and then get the first check in. We basically bootstrapped and then worked on the prototype. After we were done with the prototype, I started presenting and going into the shows and meeting with the VCs and also angels. And then within my network, there were a couple of angels early on, really liked the idea and what we were trying to build. So they wrote me small checks, $20K, $50K, in that range. And then once I got those 3-4 early checks, a couple of other bigger institutional VCs, if you will, or family funds got interested and they start writing bigger checks. So I got, 150 here and 100K there. And then came in, come to us and One Up Ventures, and they wrote much bigger checks. So that's kind of our story. And what I would, what I would have done differently or what I would prefer to happen is if we could have raised a little bit more, because, I was always very humble and I didn't want to really take too much money in early on. And it's not because, I didn't want to give up equity in the company. It has nothing to do with that. I just wanted to make sure that we can actually deliver with, not limited, but an economical way, because that's one of the premises of the company as well. We are an international, fully remote team, and we believe, we can deliver a similar quality, if not better, of the games that are costing people, tens and $20 million. So that's another reason why I didn't raise as much. But now looking back, I wish I raised like maybe another million. Yeah, that's what I would have done differently, I guess.
But you liked how things transpired, how you started with smaller checks from angels and then moved
Absolutely.
into players.
Absolutely, because the like as you get better with the game and as the game betters, I always believe that we could continue to raise, and that's what happened, right? And yeah, we raised 2.2 million, and if you look at our game versus some other games out there, quality wise, I think we look like we spent about $10-15 million in the game. So yeah, I'm very proud of that as well.
I think by the time this podcast airs, your game will be live. So
yes,
everybody can check it out.
Exactly.
Can you tell me some of the most significant challenges you faced? I feel like startup life is kind of firefighting and there's always ups and downs. Tell me about.
Yeah, I think the most of the challenges we face is, the market's turn, like probably a year and a half into, our development. So we were always planning, hey, let's raise this pre-seed round, and then, and then let's try to raise a seed round. But then that became like significantly harder as we were developing the game. So we needed to make changes in the team. We started with all the way expanding to 22, 23 people. And then as the markets turn and the fundraising didn't really come through, we needed to kind of cut back on all those stuff, right? So that's one challenge. The other is, we didn't really have that much challenge on the remote work structure, but some technical challenges, like because ours is almost like a real-time game. So we had some technical challenges that we needed to fix, and then we released our closed beta and also family and friends to a small group of people and got a lot of feedback. And then we moved our launch date based on some of the feedback we've gotten. We wanted to basically push it by 6 months. I don't see that as a negative or a challenge thing, but it's a totally different thing that you build something, and until a customer or a player sees it, you're in love with what you build, right? But the real feedback and real cycle begins when you actually put it in front of people that has almost zero emotional attachment. So and that was an interesting time, because some people said, hey, you should definitely have this, and then we went back and looked at the game design, and then we said, oh, you know what, this is a really good idea, we should definitely have it, but oh, by the way, it's going to cost us 2 months. Right. So those are the kind of things that I think not challenges, but interesting findings, if you will, that we experienced.
So the player feedback was really worth it, but
Absolutely.
Taking more time, it ended up adding complexity.
Absolutely. And then, we also ended up improving all our assets to 4K because people really liked the style, but they wanted to make sure that on a mobile device or an iPad, the images, the cards, and the collectibles look to their maximum level. So player feedback was absolutely crucial and super helpful.
Did you have any aha moments throughout building your team or your company when you think that everything's going to work?
No, I mean, not an aha moment. I mean, I'm a very driven person. So, and I'm also very optimistic. So I think the aha moment was when I started the company, to be honest. I always knew that we would launch the game. I always knew that, what I wanted to build or what we wanted to build, we could build it eventually. But like I said, there isn't that moment in between last 3 years after I started the company. I said, oh, we'll do this. Maybe, when I got my bigger check, one of the biggest checks, I said, oh, now we can actually do this.
Yeah. That was unlocking, and you already knew that it was going to happen.
Exactly.
I like how solidified you are in your belief. And I really think that what you tell yourself is going to happen happens. So
exactly. Yeah. I also truly believe that, my background. So I'm originally from Istanbul, Turkey. And, I don't have a family here. I left Turkey when I was 18. I lived in London for 2 years. And, that kind of personal growth, if you will, mirrored into the company and how, I run things. Because, I've done everything almost by myself for about 20 years or so. And then, I am a huge believer that if you tell yourself positive things, positive things will happen. So, yeah, sometimes people tell me I'm too much of an optimist, but, I like that actually.
I like that. I'm sure your team likes it too.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to work for somebody like that. What are you taking? You've worked at Zynga, many larger companies. What do you want to take from those studios? And in what ways did you want to make your own studio different?
Yeah, it's a great question too. So, when I was working at Zynga or Machine Zone or even FunPlus, I realized that as the teams became more cultural or from more different backgrounds,
Yeah.
the output, the product that they create got better. So, that's why, I don't have just employees from United States. I don't have just employees from Mexico. I don't have just employees from one nation, because it's almost my background, right? I left Turkey, lived in London, lived in Los Angeles, I went to school in Arkansas. So I got exposed to like many different cultures. And I believe I've also seen in gaming companies, when you got feedback and input from many different cultures and backgrounds, the games, whatever the entertainment vehicle that you're creating, they actually end up being better.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm trying to create with 5x5, kind of like a longer term vision. Like, I would like to create an international team versus, one team, 90% of the team in one location. So I think that's very important. And the other thing is, I think, is data and how you analyze data and how capable and how fast you can analyze data and react to the data, making changes to your product is very important. So yeah, and that we are working on that, as we launch our game, start making more money. I think I'm going to actually start expanding the team so that we can actually react a lot better and release builds a lot better or fix things a lot better or a lot faster. But that's another thing I learned. It's in analyzing capturing data fast enough and analyzing fast enough and reacting fast enough is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned you have a team from many different cultures and locations. That is incredible, and also can pose communication difficulties because people come from different backgrounds and have different beliefs, and what somebody thinks is a respectful way to communicate in one culture might be really disrespectful in another. How do you manage that and make sure everybody stays on the same page when you have a global organization?
Yeah, that's also a good question. So we kept things very flat. Like usually what happens is fully remote, multicultural companies, like the ones that I worked at, is when you add layers of management in between, like too many layers of management, that's kind of when the drama starts, right? Because what happens is a lot of people, different people consume information differently, and then they also communicate information differently. So if you have many layers of people, right, and management, and if they all consume and communicate differently, that's how the drama starts, right? So for that reason, we kept the company very flat. We have one producer, myself, and we have employees. And I would like to keep it as much as possible that way. Obviously, we'll bring in some C-level executives as the game launches and all that stuff. But I think keeping it flat, being able to be reachable by everybody, because at the end, the buck stops with me, right? So if you wanna communicate something, and if you have the owner immediately accessible, I think that's very important, and that also makes the employees a lot more understanding and relaxed, if you will. So I don't know if it answers, but that's kind of keep things flat, and then respects everybody's opinion. We have daily stand-ups where everybody joins. Like we found time zones that actually works for everybody. So communication and I think keeping things flat are important.
I like that you have the time zone overlap. My friend Julie started her company when I started my company. She has a business called Curiosity Based, and it's about getting curious why people are the way that they are. And so it's a course that you can take on your own, but I had my whole company go through it. And you kind of explain what you think is respectful and what you think is disrespectful and why, and how, for instance, I expect people to be on time for my meetings, but I don't think that I have to be on time for other people's meetings. And I expect people to be candid to me. And if people are passive aggressive, I think that's disrespectful. But other people are on completely the flip side. So I feel like once you uncover that, then you can really figure out.
Yeah, it's very interesting and challenging to run a multicultural company, right? Because you have to be really in tune or understanding of the cultures that you're onboarding to your company. So, I work with the people that I actually hired, or most of them, or I, interacted with the people from Mexico before. I interacted with the people from Vietnam before. I interacted with the people from India before. So for me, there is this understanding, right? As a founder, you have to have that understanding so that I can actually decide who the next level of management that I can hire with the exact same understanding. Because that's does that make sense? Like, you cannot hire a person that never been into international situations to run a company like mine. So yeah, I think that's key.
Yeah. How have you been able to launch with such a small team? What is the secret there?
Yeah, secret I think is being on top of things. Because again, I think it's a benefit of keeping things flat, right? Because this is my baby, and when people interact with me on a daily basis, they do feel that and understand that. So everything is moving in a pace that we like. But it's been challenging. I'm not gonna sit here and lie. If I had another 10 people, of course things would be much easier. But we basically were able to find the right people, I think, and find the right people with the right mindset. And we were able to kind of come together and say, hey, look, these are the things that we need to do in this time period, and everybody bought into it, and making sure that I am on the top of it on a daily basis, and that's kind of how we launched it.
Tell me about your hiring beliefs and practices. It sounds like culture is pretty high up there, and everybody screens for different things. So what do you really look for in people?
Yeah, I think I personally, I've done all the interviews aside from the engineering. I gotten help from our front end and back end lead. But personality-wise, I like people that are drama-free and
yes.
and very straightforward, because that's the type of person that I am. I don't really BS too much around stuff, and because I don't have time.
Yes.
And when you're on a startup that is small and also limited in funding, you have to have similar type of people, like they're doers instead of talkers. Instead of writing like 5 pages of an email, like within the same time, you can actually code something and get something done. Like those type of understanding, right? So I looked for people that are very energetic, optimistic during my first interview, right? So I do all the screenings, and then I talk to the person, and I give them a couple of situational questions, and then you can actually tell. And that's kind of like also one of my superpowers. Like, I've interacted with so many different cultures last 20 years. I can actually tell a person most of the time if they're going to be a decent employee with the qualities that we're looking for or not. So, but yeah, we're looking for straight shooters, doers, and people who doesn't like to sit in meetings for 1 hour.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We have GSD. My friend Lena calls it GSD. Everyone gets shit done on their team.
Exactly. Because, and because also that's my experience. Everywhere I worked, this was same at Zynga, same at, Tops, and a couple of places. Sometimes you end up with so many meetings and so many discussions and so many stuff, like you literally don't get anything done. And the upside for those teams, they have, in the case of Zynga, they had 2,000 employees. At Tops, we had 80 employees. At startup, you don't have that luxury. So you cannot, you have to do things all the time. And I agree with you basically need to get shit done. I mean, you can't just keep talking about it. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah, all businesses have a lot of similarities. How did you end up in the video game industry? How did you break in? And did you know you wanted to be in?
Yeah, so like I said, I left Istanbul when I was 18. So I used to run track in the Turkish national team. But even before that, I was a gamer. So I started playing games with my Commodore 64. I've gotten a Commodore 64 for my fourth grade graduation present. And after that, it's all history. I played all these, old school games, and then I start saving. I used to run track at a club called Galatasaray. I saved some money. I bought myself an Amiga 500. So I grew up playing games, and I always like to play games around soccer management, RTS games like Civilization and Rise of Nations and Age of Empire. And then the thing was in Turkey that you could never make money from games, right? So that's kind of what I found out after I graduated from my college, Arkansas State. I don't know if it's by luck or by destiny. I got a job offering from a company in Los Angeles called Gamers First as a customer support agent. And Gamers First, or K2 Network, also known as, they had a PC MMORPG free-to-play game publishing company. And I started there as a customer service agent. And they said, hey, Deniz, do you want to come and work for us? And I said, yes, sure. And they said, but we can only pay you $27,000 a year. And I said, well, I don't really care, because because I never thought that I could make money from gaming. So I moved from Arkansas to Los Angeles, and rest is history. That's kind of how it's all started. And then, I did my MBA and also had a minor in applied research. Went up really quick in my first company. I started customer support within 6 months. I got promoted to basically analyzing monetization patterns in users. So they promoted me to be a producer, and I started basically analyzing large data sets. So this is like 2006, 2007. I don't think many companies were doing kind of like a behavioral analysis and auto targeting.
Yeah.
And I basically said, hey, these users that we could target these guys because we can actually score them, and I think they can purchase. So those are the kind of things that we've done, and then from that I moved on into different roles and higher and higher. Yeah.
So user acquisition is kind of a theme. Was it chance? Was that the role that they offered you after customer support, or was it intentional to go in that direction?
No, so so for my first 2 years, I've stayed on the product design, monetization design, and kind of the top of the funnel analysis. And as we analyze top of the funnel, and in large data set, I realized, the quality of users is actually a lot more reflective into how the rest of the top of the funnel metrics behave, if you will. So I moved to San Francisco at a company called Gazillion, and I kept analyzing large data sets, and they had a Marvel IP at the time. So we analyzed how the users were behaving in terms of retention and monetization, and trying to make sense of it. And I started helping the marketing team a lot more. And then from that job, I moved to a company called Idle Games. And at Idle Games, they said, hey, Deniz, on the top of monetization, would you also like to run performance marketing? I mean, to me, it is at the end analysis of data, right? Yeah. You just basically saying, okay, instead of user behavior, can I then analyze the channels and also make adjustments based on the findings? So, and that's kind of how I tip my toes into user acquisition. And then I was there at 1 year, and then I moved to Zynga and Machine Zone, where I was fully involved in the decision making, which channels to use, how channel is performing, why are they performing bad, can we raise the bids, decrease the bids. So that's kind of how I moved into UA. And then FunPlus, it was a similar way. And then when I went to Tops, I kind of went back to my product chops as well as the performance marketing. And it's kind of start product, move to UA, go back to product. And now, obviously the company, I'm responsible for almost everything. So
Tell me about user acquisition. What are some common misconceptions? Why do things work for certain games versus others?
yeah, I think, I wouldn't want to call it like wrong ideas or misconceptions. It's just that, every genre is different, right? So a lot of people or investors, both investors and also platform owners and UA marketers are stuck with these, day 1, day 7, day 30 retention rates, and they think that it applies to every game. In a casual, hyper casual game, obviously, you're looking for 40 to 50% or even greater D1 retention. Well, in a mid-core core game, that's never the case. So I think that the understanding what type of game you have is, I think, very important. And then based on the game type that you have, what KPIs that you're shooting for, because those are very important, right? And and then I'll get a little bit more technical, maybe on the payback period times. Again, the different types of games have different types of payback times. So make sure that your model and everything, your actions and your adjustments reflect that payback model based on the type of game that you have. Because a lot of marketers actually pull the trigger a lot early for certain type of games. But yeah, it's understanding first, what game do you have? Do you have a mid-core game? Do you have a strategy game? Do you have a Forex game? Do you have a hyper casual game? And then based on that, then setting up the correct KPIs is very important.
But how do you figure out even the KPIs that you should be shooting for? I mean, you understand your game and there are some fundamental KPIs for each genre.
Yeah, I mean, it all combines with how much you're paying, right? It all comes down to eCPIs versus ELTVs. So those drive most of your KPIs. If your arbitrage is not there, or if your yield is not there, that means the KPIs that you're shooting for is not really working, right? So if I'm paying $1 and my ELTV is 80 cents, if I'm paying an eCPI $1 and my ELTV is 80 cents, that means there's something wrong either with my retention or with my monetization. So without getting too technical, that's kind of how you adjust things, right? Yeah.
Interesting. So then you can just figure out what lever to pull.
Yeah, what lever to pull also, like, do you need to, so is the problem on the monetization side? Do you let's say that you're actually saying, hey, my game is gonna make 15 cents ARPDAU with 5% conversion rate and some ratio of repeat purchases, and my lifetime value for my paying user is $60. And you come up with some sort of an ELTV number, and you also have some sort of an eCPI number. So if all those numbers balance and you're profitable at the end, and it's actually paying you back in time to kind of continue this flywheel, then you're in good shape. But if you're not, that means something is broken. A, you're either paying too much for your installs. B, they are not really monetizing at the ratio that you want. Or C, they're not paying you as much as you think they want, that you want, or you planned. So, those are the levers. I don't know if you can control all of them, but you can make adjustments definitely on the bid side, and also on the offering side and the retargeting side to increase remonetization, if you will.
Yeah. What is the most shocking thing about starting your own company, Finn? The biggest surprise?
A biggest surprise has been finding out that I'm actually a lot more creative than I thought I would. Because if you ask around about me, a lot of people will say, "Oh, he's like a business growth-minded, performance marketing, top of the funnel monetization guy." But I actually ended up surprising myself, designing all our cards, the color palette, and all that, and I really enjoy getting this feedback now. Oh, it looks beautiful, because 80% of the decision was made by me and our game designer. So that was kind of surprising, because I never thought I would like red over orange so passionately that I would actually say, oh no, I don't like this. But yeah, that's been surprising.
self-discovery journey.
Yeah.
How do you take care of yourself? Like running a game it's hard. How do you think that people can balance who are thinking about getting into
Yeah,
this,
that's
especially if you have a family? We talked about that before the show a little bit.
yeah. I mean, I have three boys, and a beautiful wife. But you know, I think it's tough to balance, to be honest, Lizzie. It's especially for an early startup like myself.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of people say, oh, self-care and all this stuff, but to tell you the truth, it's you gotta really put a lot of hours into startups. And like I mentioned, last year and a half has been challenging from the fundraising side. So
Yeah.
it made things tougher. So yeah, I wish I could sit here and tell you, oh, I cut off everything after 6 p.m. and all this. None of that is happening, right? I have
Yes.
three, four different time zones. I usually work, 12, 13 hours a day. But I'm okay with that. I also mentioned to you, I'm an optimist by DNA, and this is what I love. And when you do a thing that you love, it doesn't really feel like work, actually, right? But
Yeah.
at the end, I think at the same time, once we kind of get out of the waters, once the global launch, goes like launches, and we start, we are clear out of the waters. I'll definitely take some time, maybe a week or 10 days, which I haven't done last 3 years.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna definitely plug off, if you will. But in a startup, yeah, everybody talks these big words, right? Oh yeah, you should not do that, and you should work less and spend more time on yourself and stuff. It depends on what you actually decided to do, right? I didn't decide to go work at Zynga, or I didn't decide to go work at Roblox, where it's a 9 to 6 job or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I decided to launch my own company by borrowing $2.2 million from people, right? So that's, you need to really understand, like, when you're starting a startup, what you signed up for. So in that sense, I mean, I'm healthy, knock on wood, but this is not an 8-hour job. So
Yeah. Do you have any more optimistic advice for anybody that's thinking about starting their own company? What are some things that they could think about?
Yeah, I mean, it's super fun because, like I said, if you love, building games or whatever you're starting up, I think having your own company is the ultimate feeling, right? So the reason I say that, is because you have the power basically to call the shots, and it's a really, really I don't know the word, but it's a really good feeling, right? You don't really go by the decisions of others, and you're doing something you love. You can put in 10 hours today, 16 hours tomorrow, 8 hours next day, so you're flexible.
Yeah.
Right? But I think the most important feeling is if you love doing something, owning that thing is the best feeling. So startup is owning it. So if for the startup founders or people who wants to be or who are thinking of being founders, I think the self gratification is really good, if you will.
Yeah, it is. And you might work more, but at least you get to pick when you work.
Exactly. Yeah.
I like that. I thought, yes, I had some misconceptions myself when I started. But it's kind of nice to not fully know, just like having a kid. You can never really know what you're getting into before you start until you're doing it and you're in it. But once you're in it, you've already jumped off the cliff and you're doing it. So
absolutely. And jump off the cliff is a good idea, right? So a lot of the early, like, small check investors in my company said, Deniz, we're giving you this 50 or 25K, but even if you come close to running out, just do your thing as how you're excited now. Keep doing the way that you're feeling, and everything will work out at the end. And they said, you sometimes gotta jump off the cliff, and without knowing how deep it is.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't know if it's a positive advice for the startup fund,
It's real.
but it's definitely real. Like it's like jumping off a cliff. I'm sure everybody had those nightmares or dreams.
Yeah.
You immediately wake up, feeling this falling feeling, right? And startup is like that. So,
Yeah, it is absolutely like that.
yeah.
I have one question before I ask it. I want to point people to your website at 5by5gaming.com. This question correlates. For me, a support system has been how I've stayed sane, how I run my business, having people to talk to, answer my questions, just relate to me. Who have been your biggest supporters in your business, or people that have given you the best advice? What have they told you? How have they supported you?
Yeah, I think this is a good. So you definitely one advice that I have for the startup, whether new founders or people, planning to start their thing, they need to find 2, 3 people that they can really rely on. They don't necessarily need to be your investors, but they need to be on your advisory board, or you need to pick up people whenever you call them, they answer the phone. Because there's a lot of ups and downs in the startup journey. So for me, it was Ed Lu. I work with Ed at Machine Zone. He's currently a CFO at Fandom. It's Stefan Paniashiri. I work with Stefan at FunPlus when I was at K2. Gabby Dizon, who is the co-founder of YGG. He was one of the earliest Czechs. Even though we don't talk that frequently, whenever I talk to him, he always gives sound advice. So, and then Charlie is another investor from Lucid Blue Ventures. So those are they've been super helpful. Like whenever I talk to them, very constructive, very positive. So do you need those type of advisors that you can reach on a daily basis? So
yes, there's always questions that you just need to talk through with somebody, and so many things that come up that you could never predict.
Because I've never founded a company before. This is my first startup. So by that, by that fact, I don't know everything, right? I don't know, like any situation that a startup would face. I don't know like all of them, right? I know from the product side, I know from development side, but as a company, this is my first ride. So you definitely need some support group around you. And like I mentioned, they don't necessarily need to be your investors. They can be your advisors, your longtime business friends. That's kind of, who Ed is for me. He's been a professional friend and a personal friend as well. Stefan is the same way. So those were the people that actually picked me up in a way when I was down. And they still do to this day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
No problem. Thank you, Lizzie. This has been great.
Thanks so much for listening to the show this week. To catch all the latest from Here's Waldo, you can follow us on LinkedIn. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes. We'll see you next time.